Welcome back to the final chapter of The Becomings. For the last 6 weeks, the world has held its breath as Operation Epic Fury transitioned from a shadow war into a total, multi-front confrontation that has redefined the geography of the Middle East. The reports coming out of the plateau this morning are harrowing. The rial has effectively evaporated as a tradable currency, with the black market rate reaching heights that make basic bread a luxury for millions. The power grid in Mashhad remains dark after a series of cyber-kinetic strikes, and the internet, once a vibrant digital bazaar for the youth, has been severed by a total nationwide blackout. In the corridors of power in Tehran, a new, more hardline leadership under Mojtaba Khamenei is making what many call a final stand against an unprecedented coalition of forces. But to the historians, to those of us who have tracked the 5,000-year becoming of this nation, this is not just another crisis. It is the latest test of a survival mechanism that has outlasted every conqueror from Alexander to Genghis Khan. Today, we bridge the final gap. We travel from the silk-laden courts of the 16th century to the hardened steel and silicon of 2026. We will see how a teenage king created a religious fortress, how colonial powers turned the plateau into a chessboard, and why the current firestorm is just the latest chapter in a 5,000-year-old refusal to vanish. This is the finale. This is the final bastion. We begin our final descent into the modern era in the year 1501. The plateau was fractured, a collection of warring Turkoman tribes, fading Mongol remnants, and local principalities. It was a land without a center. Then, a 14-year-old boy named Ismail emerged from the dense forests of Gilan. He was the head of the Safavids, a Sufi mystical order that had morphed into a military powerhouse. Ismail didn't just want a kingdom, he wanted a revolution of the spirit. His soldiers were the Qizilbash, the Redheads, named for the 12-pointed crimson caps they wore to symbolize the 12 imams of Shia Islam. They didn't just follow him, they worshipped him. They believed Ismail was a living shadow of God, a warrior saint who could not be harmed by steel or lead. Understand the weight of what happened next. In 1501, Ismail captured the city of Tabriz and made a decision that would define the modern world. He declared Twelver Shia Islam the state religion. At the time, the plateau was overwhelmingly Sunni. This was not a soft transition. It was a forced, violent, and total conversion. But it worked. By forcing this religious shift, Ismail created a religious wall. He turned Iran into a Shia bastion, forever separating it from the Sunni Ottoman Empire to the west and the Mughal Empire to the east. This was the birth of the modern Iranian identity, a unique, defiant, and isolated fortress of faith. But every wall has a price. In 1514, the Safavid warrior saints met the cold reality of the modern world at the Battle of Chaldiran. The Ottoman Sultan, Selim the Grim, brought a weapon the Qizilbash considered cowardly, gunpowder. While the Persians charged with swords and bows, relying on their spiritual fervor to protect them, the Ottomans mowed them down with rows of janissaries and massive field cannons. Ismail was wounded and fled. His belief in his own divinity was shattered. This defeat was a turning point. It taught the Persians that faith alone could not defend the plateau. They needed technology. They needed a state. For the next century, the Safavids engaged in a grueling series of border wars with the Ottomans, losing and regaining Tabriz, Baghdad, and the Caucasus. It was a cycle of violence that hardened the Shia identity. The plateau became a place where religion and defense were inseparable. If you were Persian, you were Shia. If you were Shia, you were a soldier of the plateau. If Ismail gave the nation its soul, Shah Abbas the Great gave it its splendor. In the early 17th century, Abbas moved the capital to the center of the plateau, Isfahan. He called it half the world. Abbas was a master of the survival mechanism. He realized that to fight the Ottomans, he needed a professional army, not just tribal warriors. He welcomed English adventurers, the Shirley brothers, to modernize his artillery and train his troops. He reorganized the state, created a central bureaucracy, and turned the plateau into the beating heart of the Silk Road. He built the Naqsh-e Jahan Square, a space so vast it could hold polo matches, military parades, and the world's most vibrant markets all at once. To walk through Isfahan in 1600 was to see the peak of Persian aesthetics. The turquoise domes of the Masjid-e-Shah were designed to mimic the sky itself. The intricate floral patterns on the tiles were a garden that never withered. He even moved an entire community of Armenian artisans to a suburb called New Julfa to handle the international silk trade. Under Abbas, Iran was a global hub of art, trade, and power. But even then, the plateau was under pressure. The Ottomans were always at the gate. The shield of Shi'ism was constantly being tested by fire. By the 1730s, the Safavids had grown soft and decadent. The empire collapsed under a sudden invasion by Afghan tribes. It seemed the becoming of Iran was over once again. But the plateau does not stay down. A man of humble origins, a shepherd-turned-soldier named Nadir Shah, rose like a comet from the wreckage. He is often called the Napoleon of Persia, but that title barely does him justice. Nadir didn't just reclaim the land. He went on one of the most successful offensive campaigns in history. He crushed the Afghans, pushed the Ottomans back to the borders, and then did the unthinkable. He invaded the Mughal Empire in India. At the Battle of Karnal, he shattered a Mughal army 10 times his size. He sacked Delhi and brought back a bounty that remains legendary: the Peacock Throne, the Koh-i-Noor diamond, and enough gold to suspend taxes in Iran for 3 entire years. But Nadir Shah was a warning. He was a man of war who forgot how to rule in peace. He became paranoid, blinding his own son and executing his generals. His assassination in 1747 plunged the country back into chaos. He showed the world that Iran could be a military titan, but he also left the state hollowed out, leaving it vulnerable to the new giants rising in the north and west, the British and the Russians. Enter the Qajars. For the entirety of the 19th century, Iran was no longer a global player. It was a prize on a colonial chessboard. This was the era of the Great Game. To the north, the Russian Empire hungered for a warm water port and southern expansion. To the south, the British Empire viewed the plateau as the primary buffer protecting their jewel, India. The Qajar kings were tragically ill-equipped for this new industrial world. They traded the nation's future for luxury trips to London and Paris. Through the treaties of Golistan and Turkmenchai, Iran lost the Caucasus, modern-day Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan, to Russia. These lands had been Persian for thousands of years. The loss was a deep psychological wound. The people felt the becoming of their nation was being sold off piece by piece. Then, in 1908, the world changed again. The British struck black gold in Khuzestan. Suddenly, the plateau wasn't just a buffer, it was the world's most important gas station. The Anglo-Persian Oil Company was born, and with it, a new form of colonialism. Iranians saw their wealth being pumped out of the ground by foreigners while they lived in poverty. The bastion had become a colony in all but name. In 1921, a soldier named Reza Khan took power in a coup. He looked at the wreckage of the Qajar era and decided that the only way to survive was to mimic the West. He founded the Pahlavi Dynasty and set out to build a modern state with the speed of a bullet. This is a pivotal moment for the becomings. In 1935, he sent an official decree to every embassy on Earth. Stop calling us Persia. From now on, you will call us Iran. This was a strategic rebranding. Persia sounded like a fairy tale of carpets and cats. Iran, the land of the Aryans, sounded like a modern industrial power. He built the Trans-Iranian Railway, unveiled women by force, and established modern universities. But he did it with an iron fist. He tried to modernize the soul of the plateau by crushing the clergy and the tribes. He tried to replace the Shia identity with a pre-Islamic, nationalist one. But the plateau has a long memory. You cannot erase 1,000 years of faith with a railway. He created a deep rift between the secular elite and the religious heartland, a rift that was destined to explode. If there is one moment that explains the deep distrust between modern Iran and the West, it is 1953. A man named Mohammad Mossadegh became prime minister. He was a nationalist, a Democrat, and he had one simple goal: to nationalize Iranian oil. He wanted the wealth of the plateau to belong to the people of the plateau. The British were furious. The CIA, in a mission called Operation Ajax, orchestrated a coup. They hired mobs, bribed generals, and overthrew the only democratically elected leader Iran had ever known. They brought back the young Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, as a pro-Western monarch. This was the death of Iranian democracy. For 25 years, the Shah ruled with the help of his brutal secret police, the Sah-FAH-vids. But underneath the surface, the anger was boiling. The survival mechanism was preparing for its most radical pivot yet. 1979 was the year the survival mechanism took a radical religious turn. The Shah's white revolution had created wealth, but it had also created a massive, dislocated urban poor and a silenced intellectual class. The plateau didn't just change governments, it changed its entire reality. The Islamic Revolution was a total rejection of the last century of Western interference. The Shia bastion was back, but this time it was revolutionary. It was the first theocratic state in the modern world. Within months, the US embassy was seized and a 47-year standoff began. Then came the Iran-Iraq War. For 8 years, the world watched as a generation of young Iranians were sent into the sacred defense against Saddam Hussein. This war hardened the regime. It taught them that the world would stand by while they were gassed, and that their only hope was self-sufficiency and the axis of resistance. The martyrs of that war became the foundation of the state we see today. Which brings us to the present. The shadow war that has defined the last decade has finally ignited into a global conflagration. Operation Epic Fury, the coordinated strike by NATO and regional allies, has entered its 7th week. The data we are receiving today is unprecedented. Since the death of the supreme leader in February, the transition to Mojtaba Khamenei has been accompanied by a state of eternal vigilance. Yesterday, the IRGC confirmed they have effectively closed the Strait of Hormuz with a sophisticated sea mine network and swarm drone batteries. 1/5 of the world's oil is now trapped. In response, Allied forces have launched massive strikes on the Bandar Abbas naval base. In the streets of Tehran, the internet is dark, but the whispers are loud. The becoming of 2026 is a civil war of the soul. On one side, the most heavily armed theocracy in history. On the other, a generation of youth who have grown up with the internet and have no memory of 1979. They are using the survival mechanism against their own government. In the underground cafes, they are reclaiming the name Persia as a symbol of freedom against the name Iran as a symbol of the state. But the war of 2026 is not just being fought with missiles, it is being fought in the silicon. For the last 3 weeks, a massive cyber campaign has targeted the Iranian nuclear facilities at Natanz and Fordow. Unlike the Stuxnet era, these are active override attacks. Reports of centrifugal systems being forced into self-destruction and the Iranian power grid flickering in rhythmic patterns, a digital SOS from internal resistance groups within the state's own cyber infrastructure. The becoming of the nation is now digital. The plateau is no longer just a physical fortress, it is a server farm under siege. The regime's national intranet is being pierced by Starlink-enabled satellite terminals smuggled across the borders of Kurdistan. So, we ask the final question of this entire series. What is the becoming of the Iranian plateau? We have seen 5,000 years of conquerors. Alexander came and was turned into a Persian. The Arabs came and were turned into patrons of Farsi. The Mongols came and were turned into architects of mosques. Each time, the plateau digests the intruder. Today, in April 2026, the intruder is different. It is a mix of global sanctions, domestic unrest, and the brutal reality of modern kinetic warfare. But look at the history we have covered. The plateau does not break. It bends, it absorbs, and it evolves. The becoming of 2026 is not just about a change in government. It is about the synthesis of the 3 Irans, the ancient Persian, the Islamic revolutionary, and the globalized modern. These 3 identities are currently at war in the streets of Tehran. This has been the story of the Eternal Plateau. a journey from the first diplomatic treaty in history to the high-tech battlefields of today. Thank you for joining us on this series of The Becomings. This was more than a history lesson. It was an attempt to understand the heartbeat of a people who refused to disappear. If you have followed us from the throne of Cyrus to the fires of 2026, you know that history is not behind us. It is happening right now. Please like, subscribe, and share this story. The more we understand the past, the less we fear the future. Stay curious, stay grounded, and remember, every end is just another becoming. This is The Becomings.